Welcome to Kava and Kettlebells, where we talk about Kava, fitness, and life. Let's get Kava-fied.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Kava and Kettlebells. This is Charles.
Hey guys, this is Heidi. Thank you so much for tuning back in. If you haven't already, please take 5 seconds and go ahead and like this episode and subscribe to our channel. As you know, we do not monetize off this. We do not have any sponsors or any big companies that are funding this. We fund this completely ourselves, so it really relies on you guys liking, subscribing, interacting, and sharing with your friends and family. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Kava_kettlebells. You can interact with us there, send us messages, and then we also post our reviews, and we post all of our episodes. We do a post on Instagram as well. All right, guys. So on today's episode, we are going to be talking about Kava with veterans. As you know, Charles is a veteran of the United States Air Force, and Kava was huge. It was huge with his journey in the armed forces. So that is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, but of course, as always, we're going to start with our workout of the day, and I'll go first this time.
Yes,
so,
take the floor.
So today for me was legs, and the workout today was a little different. I mixed it up. Usually I don't start directly with squats. Usually I kind of like to pre-exhaust a little bit. Maybe do some lunges, things like that, body weight squats even to kind of warm up. Today, just due to the nature of the gym, it was a little busy. So I went in there. There's a squat rack open. So I went ahead and grabbed it. Started, doing working sets of squats. And today, it's not often I do this, but I do GVT, which is German volume training. And that's a whole program in itself. And it's essentially 10 by 10s. So you do 10 sets of 10 reps with usually about 60 to 70% of your max. Now, that's a whole program. I'll be honest, I've tried GVT as a program, and I just get so bored with it.
Yeah.
But what I've done is I've taken segments of that program and I'll add it into a workout. So today was kind of like a little mini GVT. So I did 10 sets of 10 reps on squat. I did 225 for those. Felt pretty good. And then kind of the rest of the workout, did some extension work. So I did hamstring extensions, laying down, did some calves. For calves, I like doing any type of standing calf raise. So I'll do the seated ones if they're available, but I like to stand. I just feel like I get a better stretch on the bottom.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's just a little bit more load bearing. So did those, did a little bit of quadricep extensions, and then ended off with some goblet squats. That was it.
Yeah. So I did back and biceps today. So it was we were in a 24-hour version of our gym, and it was a little crowded today. So I was kind of just doing what was available. But I started off with bicep curls, and then I went to the lat pull down machine. And then the curls were open, the dumbbells were open again. I had to wait for the specific weight. So I started off with a low weight for hammer curls, and then I was able to increase that weight as it became available. And then I did the seated row machine, only I did it with a handle, just doing one arm at a time. And then I went and I like doing barbell curls, but I like a straight bar. I'm not a fan of the easy bar with the curls in them, and the 24-hour gym only has the easy bar. So I know this is like a no. There's probably controversy. Charles does this all the time, but I curled in the squat rack. So I curled with the Olympic bar, and I know some people get like real heated when people curl in the squat rack, but I did that. And then I did pull-ups in the squat rack because that was all that was available. And then the regular gym opened up, and I ended with cable curls, just doing one arm behind you and just kind of curling forward. And then we both did some stair stepper to end it out. And that was my workout today.
10 minutes of stair stepper for me, and then for Heidi it was like 15.
Yeah, it was like 15. And I kept looking at Charles and like, are you done? Are you done? All right, we're done. Stair stepper is brutal.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Especially I like to do it really like after leg day, because again, I feel like stair stepper especially, I feel like it hits your glutes a little bit depending on how you walk. And then for my calves, I usually feel it quite a bit in my calves, because what I'll do is I'll kind of go on the balls of my feet. So kind of like my tippy toes almost. And again, as I'm going up the steps, I'll stretch my calves, get that stretch, and I'll kind of pop up as I'm going back up. Just kind of get a little bit of,
Yeah, and my voice. I lean forward and I definitely work my glutes. So like I engage, I use that minded muscle to like push off with my glutes. And again, I have that hip labrum potential. Can't get an MRI, so I'm not confirmed yet. But the hip labrum tear. So step ups I can't basically break 90. So doing step ups on a high box is just too much. But the stair stepper is perfect and get that glute action.
Gotta hit them glutes.
Yes.
Gotta get that peach. So yeah, like how you said in the beginning of this episode, right? So today we're talking about Kava and how the veteran community could really use Kava to help. And we'll kind of get into what kind of help I'm talking about, but also going to kind of talk like in overarching, also just for military members, service members. This kind of even corresponds a bit into first responders, right? So if you're police out there, if you're firefighter, EMT in a high stress job where, things like PTSD, sleep issues, and anxiety can kind of stem from the line of work, this, might also kind of fit you as well. So,
and it's another great thing about, first responders as well is, as we know, when you drink alcohol, it's not just that night, it's the next day. And so if you need to be active and ready, the next day, it doesn't work to drink alcohol the night before. So Kava is a really great option, not just to keep you ready that night, but also to keep you ready, the next day.
Yeah. I mean, no one likes being, hungover, or if you're not necessarily hungover, you're still going to be impacted by the alcohol that you're drinking the next day. So I'm kind of speaking more to the veteran community right now because that's where I come from. I come from a military background. If you've listened to us the past couple of years, I kind of talk about here and there. And then in our intro video episode, I talk a little bit about my service. But so overall, I did 11 years in the Air Force. I was on the flying side. So I was, in what we call aviation, right? So the aviation in the Air Force. And you might think everyone in the Air Force flies. No, it's only like a small percentage of us. So most of the Air Force is supporting the flyers, flight operations. And then, we do have some special ops guys, kind of a little different world there. But primarily, the Air Force job is to fly and it's to support the flying mission. So I went to the Air Force. I went in out of college. So I did Air Force ROTC, which is Reserve Officer Training Corps. So to become an officer in the services, this is Air Force, Marines, Army, whatever you're doing, you can either enlist or become an officer. I went the officer route. So then I went active duty right after graduating college. Then I went to flight school. Now, I wasn't a pilot. I was what they call a combat systems officer. Again, not a big fan of this analogy, but it's only pop culture reference that makes sense. But if you've seen Top Gun, Goose, the backseater, that's what I was trained as. They're just the Navy equivalent of the Air Force version. We call ourselves combat systems officers. They call themselves naval flight officers.
Yeah, but Charles then specialized in becoming an electronic warfare officer. So he was trained first as combat systems officer, and then he specialized in electronic warfare, which in my opinion is like way cooler than the backseater Goose. So he was pretty badass in my biased opinion, but
so I was lucky enough. I was able to fly on a couple different airframes, so multiple deployments overseas, combat deployments as well, Afghanistan, Iraq, all that kind of stuff. So, for me, the veteran community holds a special place in my heart. And having supported a lot of what are called tier 1 units, so those like your Rangers, your soft guys, CIA, Green Berets, all those kind of dudes, downrange, and working with them, it's something that, again, kind of holds a special, place in my heart. And being overseas, having been in operations where both Americans have died, have seen it happen, been on the, flight ramp coming back from mission, seeing bodies come off of helos. It's just something where, again, if you're from the community and you've been around it with our partners, our overseas. So talking to, for me, I come from the era of, the Middle East war. So Afghanistan partners, Iraqi partners, all that. And all that to be said, like, I understand, like, I'm not trying to this is not about politics. This is not about if, the wars were a good thing, a bad thing, whatever. My thing is like, hey, like, as military members, we don't make really decisions to go over there. It's the civilians that are voting to the office who put us over there. We're just there to support. And that's, what we signed up to do. So,
yeah. And I think that's one thing that society often, I think, forgets. You guys are just doing your job. You didn't decide where to go. You're just doing what you're told, and you don't really have a choice. You join the military to support this country, and you don't have a choice and a say in what you go and do. And so I think there's a big difference between supporting our service members and supporting, the wars that we're in. And you can support your service members without supporting the war.
Yeah. And I'll tell you too, a lot of, and I mean, I'm speaking broadly, but even come from myself, like, a lot of us in the service and stuff, like, we don't like war. We don't want to see war. We don't want it to happen. Anytime I see a conflict going on, like, it pains me to see it. Anytime I see that we're about to go into conflict, again, it pains me to see it because, again, war is it's a bad thing. Like, there's nothing glamorous. There's nothing cool about it. People die, civilians die, women and children die. It's a mess. It's a disaster. Fortunately, it is what it is, though. Like I said, I was in the service for 11 years. I loved it. I love the community. I love the people I work with. And, it all goes back to, like, I have a special, it's a special community. If you're from the community, you understand, something that we look out for each other. And when I started drinking Kava, I actually started drinking Kava while I was in the military. And in the military, especially where I was in Air Force aviation, drinking is a massive part of the culture. So I mentioned this before, but, like, in our flying squadrons, we have full bars in the squadron.
Yes, they call them, the heritage room. And, the idea is it's a great place for everyone after a long flight. Go to the heritage room and you are able to bond and talk about things. But, like, it's kind of odd, in my opinion, the idea that they're encouraged essentially to regularly drink alcohol.
Yeah, it's a big piece of the culture. Like, even back in flight school, like, your first ride, it's customary that you get your instructor, a full bottle of alcohol. It's just everywhere.
Well, it's like cradle to grave, because your first ride, you get your instructor a bottle of alcohol, and then what they call your Finny flight, which Charles had 2 different aircrafts and never did a Finny flight. But on your Finny flight, it's customary to,
and that's like your final ride.
Yeah, your final. Yeah, and it's customary for everyone to come out and throw champagne on you and douse you in champagne. So it's literally, like, from the beginning to the end of your flight career, it's encouraged in one way or another.
And, it's the same thing, like, across all services. We hear it, like, in the Marines, the Army, Navy, right? Coast Guard, didn't forget about you guys. All right. Yes, you're part of the military. But, alcohol is such a big piece of the military culture. It's a massive, massive fabric that I would say holds some of the culture of the military together. Now, I'm not here to say that it's a bad thing, okay? Like, I'm well aware that you can drink in moderation. I'm well aware that, yes, it can be fun, it can be a good time. But personally, what I've seen, though, and especially I see it more with veterans who get out, and, if you're somewhat tied into the veteran community, or, no prior service members, when veterans get out, for a lot of them, it's a really rough transition. And we know that veteran suicide rates are very high, especially the past 20 years. Yeah,
suicide rates are so high. And you have to understand, for most people, this has been their identity. Like, that is what they have known themselves as. And it doesn't matter when you get out, you are transitioning and you're losing that identity. Like, you're losing that part of yourself. And that's challenging. That's hard. And all they've known to cope with that is alcohol. And so for a lot of people, they aren't, not everyone, I think Charles has done a great job, transitioning out. But he never really placed his identity in being an aviator in the Air Force, but a lot of people do. And then when they lose that, doesn't matter if it's after 6 years or 10 years or 20 years, it's common to become depressed. And the answer more often than not is alcohol. And yeah.
And one thing to think about too, so for a lot of veterans out there getting out as well, things like PTSD is a prevalent issue. Sleep issues are big. That's due to all the crazy schedules, deployments, all that kind of stuff. PTSD feeds into sleep issues as well. And then, anxiety, especially for a lot of service members, it's the anxiety of, trying to fit in back to society, trying to...
Or even just after a deployment. So it doesn't even have to be, it very much is, as a veteran, but even after a deployment, like Charles can attest, it's hard. Like you've been away from your family for 3 to 12 months, however long we create a schedule on our own. We create this new routine without you. And then you have to come in and you have to try and assimilate to your own family. And it's hard on everyone. Like it's a transition period for everyone.
Yeah. And it's something that's very unique. But again, even you'd think that you'd be really happy coming home.
Which we are. You
are, but it's challenging because you spent time somewhere else doing something very different, and you come back, and a lot of people don't understand, what you were doing, or don't understand.
Your own family doesn't understand, you know?
And that's also something too, a lot of first responders can probably relate to.
Absolutely.
What police see on a daily basis, what firefighters, EMTs who will show up to car accidents on a daily basis and see mangled bodies. That's not something your average person sees every day. It's high stress environments that, as an operator, you have to put into a compartment, put away, and keep moving, and for those of us in the military, that's kind of what you're taught, right? You're taught to assess the situation, the mission, whatever. If something happens, it is what it is. You got to flex and you got to move on. Doesn't matter what you just saw. Doesn't matter what happened. You just got to keep moving. You got to keep getting the mission done. And all that stuff you compartmentalize and you throw back. Eventually, it's going to come back up, right? Whether that's, the next day, the next week, the next year, within the next decade, okay? So now you might be asking, all right, well, how does Kava play into all this stuff? Well, again, I started drinking Kava during my service. And for me, I was looking for an alcohol alternative because, again, alcohol is so part of the culture. And, I understand because you need something to decompress, just like anybody else out there. But if you don't want to drink alcohol, what other options are there? Well, for military and for, again, first responders, police, EMTs, you're drug tested. So cannabis is kind of out of the question, right? Unless you want to risk your career, which some people do.
Yeah, some people do, but we're not necessarily encouraging that.
Yeah. And so when I found Kava, I found that this was not only an alcohol replacement, but, I noticed that it started helping with my sleep. And then even after one of my last deployment in the Air Force, actually, it was one of the biggest things coming home that helped me decompress. And again, kind of going back to coming home, you're really excited, but it's a hard transition coming back into civilian life.
And this last deployment, especially for Charles, was the most challenging deployment. He's been deployed 5 times, and it was the scariest deployment. It was the only deployment where his, commander has ever had to call me and be like, "It's fine. Don't listen to what's on the news. Like, your husband is fine." And, there's a lot happened. And he came home, and literally 4 or 5 days later, everything shut down because of the pandemic. Oh, yeah. So he went from this high stress, very intense deployment, lots of near death situations, to coming home and being forced to be with his family 24/7. And although that sounds like not a big deal, that's a huge deal.
It's
and
super overwhelming.
Yes.
A lot of stimulation.
Loud little children, like loud all over him. Very, very overwhelming. And I think Kava was like really helped you survive that.
It did. So coming home, like I'll use that deployment as an example, right? It's like a different type of stress. Like when I was deployed, I was used to going to bed and having like rockets literally come over, my room and waking me up and being like, did it hit me? Nope,
I'm alive. Okay.
Yeah. Things like that. But then coming home and there being no threats and you're just there. Then you have kids, screaming, and you have, you're back to like the obligations and everything like that. It's a very weird thing. And for me, Kava, it was, and I'm not saying it was a crutch, but it helped me relax. It helped bring down my anxiety, it helped me sleep. And again, it helped me be present around my family, but it took me from here down to here.
And I think it allowed, you can confirm or deny this, but I think it allowed him to, what he said, be present with us, like be with us. And of course he's excited to be home, but he's still anxious. He still feels like this isn't where I should be. I don't fit in. And it allowed him to come down and be present with us and enjoy being around us, to be able to tolerate us. He has 2 little daughters and a wife. Like that's a lot of noise. Like that's a lot of estrogen. And that's hard. That's hard. And again, put on top of that, the pandemic where everything was closed. It's not like he got to go to work. It's not like he could even go to the gym. Everything was shut down. And and it helped him just still be able to push through that and enjoy that time and still make those memories. And I think that's huge.
Yes. And, I want people, out there. So if you're, a veteran listening, or again, if you're a first responder, or even active duty military, and I'll talk about this in a second, because a couple of months ago, the DoD, so the Department of Defense, banned Kava for service members, which really, really upset me and pissed me off, for a multitude of reasons, because I think it's one of the best tools for service members to use while they're in the service to help them relax. Because again, your option is alcohol. Okay. It's not like a civilian where you can go, get cannabis and relax or do other things, right? Mushrooms, all that kind of stuff, put you in a different place. Really the only options that military and first responders have to deal with stuff is alcohol. And alcohol, we know, is depressant. So yeah, it might make you feel good for a little bit, but then you're going to feel like shit the next day, and it's going to be a continuous cycle. And what I've seen and what I've talked to a lot of veterans in the Kava community who spiraled when they got out because of substance abuse. And all they had was alcohol, or they had what the VA gave them. So, Veterans Affairs. And, those were doctors, potentially prescribing them certain medications, right? And I'm not saying medications aren't bad, right? They might be needed for some things, especially if you are clinically depressed, things like that. Like I understand. But a lot of people do not want to be reliant on medications. And talking to a lot of veterans in the Kava community, they found that they were able to find Kava. They found that it helped reduce their anxiety. So, certain medications were able to be reduced or completely taken out of the scenario because Kava was able to reduce that anxiety. Kava was able to sort of declutter their life, help them sleep, help them relax, right? And then alcohol started falling by the wayside, because we talked to a lot of people who start drinking Kava. Alcohol starts seeming almost,
they just don't think about it anymore.
Like it's just not a thing.
Yeah, they don't crave it, they don't want it, and it's just not. It doesn't have that control over them, And we we have never been in a situation where we've been addicted to alcohol. It's never had that control over us, but I know it does over a lot of people where they don't want it. They know it's bad for them. They feel so bad, but they just can't not pick it up and they can't not drink it. And then they find Kava and, other botanicals, and it helps that hold on them just release, and they feel like the alcohol isn't calling to them anymore, and it doesn't have that hold on them. And that's huge. Like, that's amazing. And this is not medical advice. We always have to say this, so we are not telling you to drop any prescriptions that you have. If you are on a prescription, you need to talk to your doctor about that. But this can be a tool to help you. It will not cure anything. This is not medical advice. It will not cure you, but it can, help be a tool, and it can definitely help in situations.
Yeah. And Heidi put it a good way. Like, it's a tool. It's not necessarily the tool. It's a really good tool to have in your toolkit to help you with some issues that you might be having. Another thing too for veterans when you get out is you have a loss of community.
Yeah, I think that is probably one of the biggest things as well. And I think that, you can speak for yourself, but I think that's one of the biggest things that you miss is, not necessarily, of course you miss what you were doing, you miss, the mission, but you miss that community.
You do, because again, it's a very specific community. You all kind of understand each other. And again, for, some civilians and the gap between civilians and service members is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We're at the smallest service across the board we are right now that we have been in decades. So a lot of people don't even know someone, who served, who was in the war, who's in combat, right? They might be like, oh, my cousin was in the Army, or oh, my friend's, boyfriend, I know was like in, the Marines or something like that. So that gap is getting wider and wider. So for a lot of veterans, it's hard to relate to their people because they feel like civilians can't relate to them. So that loss of community is a big thing. But the Kava community, and we'll hit on this all the time, like the Kava community is something different. You go to a Kava bar, you're going to have all different types of people there, all walks of life.
And so welcoming. It is, the most welcoming place. It doesn't matter who you are, people are excited that you're there. They're excited that you're trying it. If it's your first time, and you'll build a community. And I think that at every single Kava bar, maybe not every single, but most Kava bars we've been to all over the country, Charles has met another veteran in there.
Yeah, I've been able to find a veteran there, or again, I've been able to get linked up with someone, in the community, in the area, who was a veteran, right? And I think it's important, for veterans out there, like you got to find community when you get out. And yes, there's veteran groups out there, there's things where you can go with other service members, but I think in a way too, that closes you off from society, and it kind of keeps you from, that constant, that growth, right? Meeting new people, talking to other people in other career fields, other experiences, right? Outside of the box that we're just in. I think a Kava bar is a great place to do that because, again, when you drink Kava, it opens you up. You remember what you're talking about. It puts you in a positive mood. It gives you an optimistic outlook on life. It's not like going to a bar and slamming shots of Jaeger, blacking out, getting into a fight, and then feeling like absolute ass the next day. Okay? You go to a Kava bar, you're going to meet people, you're going to have good conversations. You're going to feel good. When you drink this root, it's going to do good things for your body. It's going to help with inflammation. It's going to bring your cortisol down. It's going to, help take that stress away. These are all things that people who are in high stress environments could really use in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about, PTSD and things like that, I think PTSD is something that is the average person doesn't truly understand PTSD. When they think PTSD, they think, oh, someone hears a loud bang or someone sees a movie about war and they freak out and it brings them back to, you know, their experience. And that is true. Like that can happen. But it's a lot of things. Like, and I think it's something that even if you can handle it really well, like, you know, Charles has PTSD. He's very functional though. It is not a debilitating thing for him. But it creeps up in ways that you're not necessarily expecting. And I think that Kava is a great thing that, you know, when that happens, you can turn to the Kava and you can drink the Kava, and that can just help settle you and like bring you back to where you are. And even on things like, you know, 4th of July, New Year's, those are triggering times for a lot of veterans with PTSD because of the fireworks, because of the loud booms. And that's something that you go to parties on those holidays. What are they always, you know, included? Just a bunch of alcohol. Like, and if you drink that alcohol and then this is just my opinion, this is not like a fact, but I can imagine that would make you even more susceptible if you do have PTSD to hearing those fireworks, hearing those noises, and like bringing you back and triggering, you know, an episode. And like, what a better way to enjoy that time with your friends and family, to have Kava and just be happy and calm and peaceful and balanced, and then be able to handle a situation, you know, better in that state than being drunk.
Yeah. And I do think like the cortisol response for a lot of things, and I'm speaking out there to the first responders right now too, right? You think about like, again, going back to EMT, who might have dealt with multiple car accidents in a day, right? And they see some, you know, even think about like,
just think our accident,
yeah,
like
even like, you know, trauma doctors out there, nurses, everything, people on a daily basis, or, you know, military members who deploy and overseas and see some of the worst things, like some of the worst stuff out there you never thought was a thing until you see it, right? That your cortisol response is going to get all jacked up. And, you know, kind of go back to the people who see it on a daily basis. So EMT responders, cops, right? You come home, you got to dump that adrenaline, you got to dump that cortisol, right? And instead of reaching for alcohol, instead of reaching for, you know, pills that are potentially prescribed, again,
or not prescribed.
Yeah. You know, why don't you reach for something that's natural, that we know has very, very minimal side effects. It is very, very low toxicity. Again, we've talked about the side effects of Kava. If you haven't listened to our side effects on Kava episode, please go listen to it. Too long, didn't read. There's minimal to none, right? This root, when you drink it, if you drink too much, it's going to let you know, but it's really hard to get there. So again, it's very hard to overdo Kava, but just enough is a great thing to put you in a good spot.
Yeah, so the Kava itself, and then, you know, Kava bars. So if you're someone, whether, you know, you're an active duty member, a veteran, or even if you're just in recovery, doesn't matter what your phase in life is, a Kava bar is such a great place to build that community. If you are looking to, you know, build a new community, if you need to leave that old community for whatever reason, a Kava bar is just so great. Like it's such an amazing spot, and it's nothing like an actual bar. It's just such a great welcoming space with, you know, there's Kava bar for everyone. Every Kava bar has a different vibe. You just have to go find the vibe for you, find your people, your community. And I mean, it's life-changing in my opinion.
Yeah. So I alluded to this in the beginning of the episode, and I talked about how when I was in the military, I drank Kava. Like right as I got out, the Department of Defense, that's all encompassing all military services, banned Kava. And again, my take on that, super, super frustrating. A lot of initial anger and confusion.
I think to play devil's advocate though, it's just about education. Yeah. And so I think they just don't know. And there's not enough studies on it that they don't know. They know that it is, you know, psychoactive. They know that it does something. It's getting more popular. So because they just don't know, and it's probably a bunch of old people who, you know, created it, who've never tried it, the idea scared them. So they decided to ban it. Super frustrating. I understand, I guess. But yeah, it's super frustrating because I think this botanical could help service members so much. And so it's really frustrating that there are those people who are by the book and won't drink it. But I'll let you get back to what you're saying. I don't think you should be scared. I don't think you should be scared, even though it's banned.
And I'll say this. So we have an audio episode. So if you go back to our audio episodes, we do a full episode on the DoD banning Kava. And my kind of advice from it is, as of now, the DoD has a drug, they have a drug testing program. And that drug testing program does not include Kava lactones. And that's, as of the most recent info I have received and I have researched, is no different than when I was in the service, 6 months ago. They do not test for Kava lactones. It's not saying that drug tests can't test for Kava lactones in your system, but the military currently, on the panel drug tests that they give, Kava lactones are not included. So if you're active duty and you're drinking Kava, are you going to pop, positive for something? No, you're not going to. Now, it's still a banned substance. So again, that's up to you if you want to use said substance in the comfort of your own home without knowing.
Without taking pictures and posting it up on your social media, without talking about it the next day at work and bragging about it to, have those people overhear you. So if you do choose to do it, that's your choice, but just keep those things in mind. Maybe don't broadcast that you're doing it.
But as of now, you will not pop on any drug test, but it is a quote unquote banned substance per the regulations.
And it's like, the banned substances, you can go look, you can find it online for yourself, but it also includes things like poppy seed. Like you can't have a poppy seed muffin, like hemp hearts. I remember posting, this was when Charles was active duty, and posting, encouraging, if you're having a hard time getting your protein, like sprinkle some hemp hearts. And someone actually responded to me, a spouse, and she was like, you're not supposed to eat those. And I'm like, this is why he's getting out. Like, this is ridiculous. So I say that because there are those people who follow the rules by the book. And if they're not allowed to have hemp hearts, by goodness, they're not going to have hemp hearts. But again, it's your choice. You cannot be tested. In our opinion, it is not something worthy of being banned. I think it is so beneficial. And you don't need to be scared. It's so much better than alcohol. If you're okay, drinking alcohol, you should have no fears about drinking Kava.
Zero fears. But yeah, so kind of tie things up. If you're a veteran out there and you are looking for a community, you are looking for something natural that's going to help you kind of come down, relax, or if you're in another high stress job out there where maybe you have some PTSD type symptoms from the career field, you have high anxiety, maybe you see or deal with very traumatizing things on a daily basis, and you do not want to lean on alcohol and you're trying to live a healthier lifestyle, I would highly, highly recommend taking a look at Kava. Again, it's a great botanical, minimal side effects. Give it a try. Let us know what you guys think.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right, let's do a bula.